Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Professor.
Okay, so since last class, like last week, some of you asked about the exam. So your first exam will be on Thursday, October 14th. So that will be next Thursday. And your exam will be 15 minutes during the class time. So it will start at 1:40 and it will end at 2:30. So you should join the Zoom meeting, right? The classroom meeting 5-10 minutes before the class start. Just set everything up. So during the exam, you will only allowed to have the Zoom open and also your exam browser, right? So you will just turn on the camera on the Zoom and then you can go to Blackboard to open your exam. And there's nothing else allowed to be opened. So you should not open any other browser except your exam. No other notepad are allowed to use. You can open like a terminal competitor to test your code. So the only thing that allowed to open is a Zoom for you to turn on the camera and the exam itself. Okay, and no copy and pasting are allowed on Blackboard. So when you put your answer, don't copy paste anything and don't put your answer in like a notepad or test editor and then copy paste it. Right, you are not allowed to copy paste on Blackboard. So if there's any question you copy paste, it will cheat as cheating. Okay, so your answer need to directly, or you need to answer your question directly on the Blackboard test box. Again, you are not allowed to use any compiler, like including Windows PowerShell. So nothing allowed to open besides the Zoom meeting and the Blackboard exam itself. So you can compile your code and then test it. Well, it's an exam, so you are not allowed to test your code. So you will put your code in. So you will just write up your code. Okay, and I see people asking, can we use scrap paper? If you need some scrap paper to do some maybe calculation, you can do that. Okay, and also notice that the on Blackboard text box, the tab key does not work. So normally when you put your answer, like when you put your code into the test editor, right, you can use a tab key. And but the tab key does not work on the Blackboard text box. So you need to go to the, you need to return, go to a new line, and then you can use a space for indentation.
How many spaces should we use?
It doesn't matter.
As long as they're consistent?
Yes. Okay, and Okay, I think that's everything I want to mention about the exam. And I see people asking, do we need to study the comments for the text? In, if you worry about the Linux command to compile your program, you don't need to worry about it. So only the thing that covered in lecture will be on the exam. Okay, I see people asking how many questions are there. There will be 4 questions. Some questions will be multiple parts. And there will be partial correct, depends on the completion of the question. There are 4 questions. Okay, and you need to take the exam with the section you are registering. So if you are in the 140 section, your exam will start at 140. If you are in the evening section, then you need to take the exam with your evening class. So that will be 6:30.
Can you say that again?
You need to take the exam with your own section. So if you are in this class, you will take your exam at 140. If you are in the evening section, they will take the exam at 6:30. So the exam will include up to the nested loop.
So the exam only goes up to what we did last class?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, and if you miss the exam, there's no makeup exam. So make sure you start the exam on time.
If we have like internet problems, what should we do?
Try to connect back in as soon as possible, and
Okay.
you should be able to get back to the exam. Okay.
So it saves your responses, so you can like come back in
Yes.
case you
Yes.
lose internet. Okay.
Yes. Okay, so this is the your Blackboard homepage, right? So on the side right now you see there's lecture note, and I just post the practice problem up. So next Thursday you will see there is another folder called exam. So you will find the exam there. Now I put practice question on nested loop. So there is the question and then the solution, so you can compare your answer. And for the practice test, so for the practice test, I won't grade it. So it's not mandatory, just there for you to practice. I will post the solution up later. Right, so when you start the exam, you will see one question at a time. Then, so this will be like a typical question. So you will see some code, and then this will ask you what's the output for line A. So if you look at line A, it will see out X, and then X times A, and then you can look for the X and then the A. And then you will put the answer in the text box here. So you can say for A, now if you look at output line for A, right, it will return X. and then you have x times a. So x times a will be 30.
Does it automatically go to int or doesn't it go to double? Isn't it 30.0?
Okay, so if you run the program, you should know that when you multiply an integer in a double, you will get a double. But since you will have 30.0, when the C++ print that, it won't print the decimal if you have 0.0.
So in the test we just put like the regular 30.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need to know set precision?
What is it?
The set precision method, do we have to use it in the test? It's, I don't know if we went over it in this class or it's lab, but it was to make it so, oh, okay, we didn't learn it. Okay.
Okay, and I see people asking, should you space out the 6 and then the 30, or fine with no space? It depends on the question, right? It's asking what the output at line A. So it will print x, x will give you 6, and after the 6, you will print x times a right after it, right? So the code here didn't ask you to put the space, so you should read the code. If the code here told you to have space between it, then you put space between it. But remember that C++ will only do what you ask it to do. Nothing more, nothing less. So if it asks you to do a space, you need to do a space. If not, then you shouldn't have a space in between.
Professor, for line A, you see you have C out arrow arrow up, C out arrow arrow X. Can you please explain that, because I just really don't understand what the arrows do.
The arrows here, you will print the X. That's the syntax for the C out. It will print the X value to the console.
So then the answer would be what? It'll show up at 6, and then
Yes.
it'll show up 6 divided by 5.
Where do you,
My bad. Multiply X times A. It'll show up. So it'll show up 6, and then it'll show up 30.
yes, it will show up right after it, because it, so remember C++ will only print space or goes to like a different line if you tell it to do so. Otherwise, it will just print it right after it. Right, we discussed that the first few class. Okay, so it will print the X value, which is 6, and then it will print X times A, which is 30, which is right after it, since after you print the 6, you didn't tell it to print anything, right? So what it look like is you will have the 6, and then you see your, my cursor is still here. And then it will ask you to, right after it, you will print X times A, which is 30. And then what it does, it will say end line. And end line is like the return you move to the next line. Now, wherever it comes next, it will print at a different line.
So the value is going to be 30.0, but it just doesn't show the 0.0 when you print it out.
Yes, so in C++, when you print decimal, when you print a double type, if your decimal is 0.0, it will just read as human, it will just ignore the 0.0. But the value is a double type.
So the value is 30.0.
Yes, but when you print it, you will just say 30.
Okay.
So so for answer B, you have for line B, you have Y divided by Z, so that's gonna be 0. And then new line, slash NN. What's NN?
Wait, isn't it Y mod Z?
Sorry, yes.
Okay, so you have Y mod Z, so you have 0 mod 3.
So it's gonna be a remainder 3.
What's 0 mod 3?
0.
0, right? So right after 0, what you print, you will print. Now you have like a quotation, right? Wherever inside the quotation is supposed to be a string, right? You will print wherever you have there, except some special comment there. So you see like the /n means a new line. So you have a new line, and then you have another n. But this n here is not a comment. It's just an n, and then you go to a new line. So after you print the 0 here, right? 0 mod 3, you have a 0, and then you go to a new line, and then you print n, and you go to another new line. So after we print the 0, you have the /n. It will tell you to go to a new line. It will ask you to print an n, and then you have another new line, followed by z over x. Now z over x, you have 3 over 6, which is integer division. So when you have 3 over 6 in the integer division, you get 0 again. So your output will be 0 and 0 all in separate line.
You said 3 over 6.
Yes.
That's not 0.
What's 3 over 6?
Well, it's a
1/2.
half, right?
But what's
Well,
the
it's
integer division?
Oh, right. It's not a double. Okay.
Z and x are both integer type.
Okay, can you explain that a little further?
When you do integer operation, or when you do any operation between two integer, you will get integer back.
Right. And since 3 over 6 is 1/2, that would be a 0.5, 0.5. So that's why you would have to double, right? So the answer is 0.
Okay, so the integer division, it will only give you the quotient part. So before we learn decimal, you probably learn it in like 3rd grade or 2nd grade. When you first learn division, before you know what's a decimal number, what do? You will know when you divide, there's a quotient, there's remainder. So the integer division will give you the quotient.
Right, man. So, Professor, what if it was like switched x over z and 6 divided by 3? That would just be 2, or would that also be 0?
Was 6 divided by 3.
That would be,
It will be 2, right? 3 will go into it 2 times.
yeah. So since it's not like a decimal, it won't be 0 because it's declared that x is an integer, right?
Okay, so since here your z and x are both integers, when you divide it, you will get integer back. So just think of how many times does x go into z? X go into z 0 times, so the answer is 0.
I have a question about mods. So if you have a small number mod a bigger number, it's always going to be the first number.
Yeah, so think of the modulus as a remainder. Right, if you have like a small number divided into like a bigger number, it doesn't even go in, right? So the whole number will be the remainder.
Yeah, so it's 0 remainder, big number.
So
right?
here, okay, so when you have 6 mod z, like y mod z, you have 0 mod 3. So that's a so think of what's a remainder of 0 divided by 3. So 3 will go into 0 time with nothing left, so you have 0 as a remainder.
Okay, and if you had like 2 mod 3, that would be 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Because wait. So module just gives you the remainder, right?
Yes, that's what modulo do here.
So if you do 1 module 2, that's 1 divided by 2, which would be 0.5. So the answer would be 0.5.
Again, you need to look at you are doing the integer division or not. If you are doing integer division, you don't get 0.5 because 0.5 is not integer.
So yeah, so then in that case, because it's 0.5, so then the answer is 0.
You
Yes,
get
because it
0
doesn't go
remainder
into
one.
it.
Yeah, bro. Think about it like this: like 3 divided by 6 is 0.5, but because it's an integer, you take off anything after the decimal. So 0.5, you get rid of that, and you just keep the 0.
Okay, but in the case of module, you would keep the remainder.
Yeah. So 1
Mhm.
divided by 2 is not 0.5, it's 0 remainder 1.
Oh,
Unless it's a double, unless one of them is a double. If they're both integers, then you do it like that. But if they're both integers, it's gonna be 0 remainder 1.
And usually when you do modules, it's the remainder is usually 0 or 1. It can't be anything else.
Well, that's if you do mod 2, but if you do like mod 3, it could be 0, 1, or 2. Right, Professor?
It really depends on what you're dividing by, though.
Yeah, it depends what's after the mod.
Yeah, so your modular will always be less than the number you are dividing, and it cannot be negative.
Oh yeah, so like you can't use negatives in any mod and left to the right, right?
You can take a negative number modded by a positive number. Normally, when we do modulus, we are only do modular of like a positive integer.
So just in case like it's on the test, how would you do a negative mod a positive?
Again, think of it as the quotient and then the remainder. Right, so you will think how many times does it go into it while making the remainder positive.
yeah. Let's go. Can we do that module thing one more time? Okay, so 1/2, right? So you have 2 divided by 1 in long division. So that's
Well, it's 1 divided by 2, right? That's what you're trying to say?
mhm.
Yeah, so we're not using decimals here. We're with the mod, we're using like what you learned in like 3rd grade, which is like 1 divided by 2 is 0, remainder 1.
Is it?
Make sense?
Let's see. Let's see the professor do it.
Okay, so if
Okay.
you look at 1 divided by 2, does 2 go into 1? How many
Can we do
times
it?
does
Can we do it long division style?
okay, if you want to do a long division, sure. How many times does 2 go into 1?
0.
0.
So you make
And
a
what's the
decimal.
left over? Right, so you have 2 times 0 is 0, so 1 minus 0, that will give you 1. So you have, this is your quotient, this is your remainder.
Okay. See, the way I was doing it was I would, you make a decimal. So it goes in 0 times, then you go 1.0, so it would be 0.5.
Yeah, but that's when you are doing double, when you are looking for the actual division. But since here we are only with integer, you don't go down if you can't divide anymore.
Oh,
You
I
just
didn't
stop
feel
there.
like that. So this is a little bit backwards for me. So it doesn't go in, so it's just a remainder 1. Okay. I'll try to keep that in mind. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you for showing.
Can we just do one example with like a negative mod, a positive?
What number do you want to do?
How about -6 mod 4?
Okay, so let's say you want to have -6 mod 4. So this is pretty okay. So you need to know that your remainder will always between 0 and then 1 less in the number you divide. So your R will always in between 0 and strictly less than 4, which in this case will be 0 and less than equals to 3. Now, if you look at it, normally when we divide, the answer will be, well, you will get negative 1 point something. So pretty much
So-
what you want to do is you want to write -6 as 4 times something plus a remainder. And then this number here is your quotient. And this number here is your remainder.
So the quotient will be -1.
Okay, if the quotient is -1, what will the remainder be? It will force it to be -2, right?
Yeah.
But we just say that -2, the arc need to be in between 0 and 3. So it
Oh,
cannot be negative. So you need to make the quotient smaller so the remainder can be bigger. So this way you get -8 here, and to make -6, your remainder will be 2.
okay.
So if you have -6 over 4, you will get -2, and then if you do it with the modulus, you will get 2.
Okay.
So you can easily test it out with the calculation like that.
So I know like positive division, you're trying to get the number to be less than the number. This one you're trying to make it, it's still, well, it's less than 4 times -2 is less than -6, but it's like the absolute value is bigger.
So when you're doing module, the answer is always the quotient. I thought it was the remainder.
Yeah, so let's see here. Okay, so normally when we do divide and then the R, you should get the quotient and then the remainder.
Wait, but why is it -2? I thought you said it was positive.
So I think in C++ here, it will just give you
So it's like the first equation, -6.
yeah, it will just see how many times you go into it with the negative modulus, but normally that's
So it would be -6 is 4 times -1 plus -2 then, right?
yes, but let's not worry about that. Let's stay in the with
that won't be
the
on,
positive number. No.
so that won't be on the test.
Yes, but normally when we do modulus, the mod will return to you a number between 0 and 1 less than that. So I believe that's how it works in Python, right? So for those who know the Python code, if you test it, it should give you -2, and then the 2.
You know what I think it is? It's set of between 0 and 4. It's probably between 0 and -4.
No, the remainder need to be
No,
non-negative.
I mean in C++, because you just showed that when you did it, you got a
And that,
negative remainder.
and that's because our number is negative. So what it does is each, let me see.
It looks like it does that first equation, the 4 times -1 plus -2.
Let me add. I think what it does is it treats it as a negative because I forgot to add the parenthesis around it.
Oh,
So you just negate it, because if you do 6 divided by 4, you will get 1, and then 6 mod 4, you will give you 2, and then if you just put negative sign in front of it, you will get that.
wait, so the negative has lower precedence than the division?
Because C++ read that as a minus sign, I think. If you don't put it with the parenthesis. It's like if you notice that in your calculator, your minus sign and then the your minus sign and the negative sign are different key. But when we type in code here, we don't have like the sign for to separate the minus and then the negative sign.
Yeah, so it's still negative. So I guess it's just doing the first one.
Yeah, I think that might be the C++ syntax.
So yeah. So yeah, that's why I was saying the remainder is probably between 0 and negative 4, because the second number is 4.
Okay, so for now we will just stay with the positive, but the answer should be positive, right? Because that's how we define the quotient and then the remainder.
Okay, I mean, I just wanted to check if it was on the test or not.
So on the test, you just need to worry about the positive division.
Okay,
You don't need to worry about the negative sign.
thank you.
Professor,
Yes.
again, I was under the assumption that when you're doing the modular, that the answer is the remainder.
Yes.
But for -6 divided by 4, the remainder is positive.
Yes. Because you are dividing by 4. 4 is a positive number. And what's the possible remainder when you divide 4? 0 through 3.
Yeah, but so you said the answer is 2, but in the code that you wrote, the answer is negative.
Yeah, and I think that's the C++ syntax that made that happen. So I think that's just the C++ program. But the way we define quotient and then the remainder is you will write your number as your divisor times quotient plus r. And that's what we call the division algorithm. And for those who take 220, you will know that. So the way we define quotient and the remainder is, if you want to find quotient and remainder for two numbers, for your a, let's say a divided by d, right? We will find quotient with a remainder r. Now to rewrite it, you will be able to write a as d times q with the leftover. So this is like you are checking how many times does d go into a, right? So you're multiplying the quotient and there will be some leftover. And this leftover will be your remainder, and that will be greater or equal to 0. And it will be strictly less than d. And this is how we define the quotient and then the remainder.
I'm just happy this won't be on the test.
Okay, so for the integer division and the modulus, you just need to worry about the positive division. Okay, so I will let you to practice the practice test first. So if there's any question, we can go over it next Tuesday. So I will reserve time next Tuesday for you to ask any question.
Is there no class on Thursday?
There will be class on Thursday,
Oh, okay, we'll do review. Okay.
but we will do review on Tuesday. Okay, so we will move on to, there is class Thursday.
I think Monday is the holiday, not Thursday.
Okay, so we will look at function today. So first we need to define what's a function in C++. Right, so most of you probably know what's a function in math, right? You have normally you will get like an equation, right? And then a function will take in some input and then do some calculation. You will get an output, right? So a function in C++ will be a small piece of code that will carry out a single useful task that you can call, which means we can use whenever the task is needed. So a function is needed in programming is when you try to code some, when you want to repeatedly use like a piece of code and you don't want to type it over and over again, right, for whatever that task. You just want to use it whenever you want to, or you just want to like call maybe the function name and then use it. That's where the function comes in. So function allows you to code once and use many times. Now I can give you a typical function. From math, I can give you an example of square root of x. Right, we all know what the square root of x do. And this can be done in C++ as well. So every function has an attribute. So there will be a name for a function, and there will be an input to process, and there will be the type of result or output. So every function will have these three attributes, right? So for example, for the square root function, so for the square root function, it will have a name sqrt, stands for square root, and it will take in a double, or you can take square root of any real number, and the result will be a double. But when you take a square root of number, you will get a double. Now there are some other functions. So let's say you want to compare compute power, right? So let's say you want to like take 2 raised to the 5th power, right? So for the when you're trying to compute the exponent function, there will be 2 input. There will be a base and there will be the exponent. So for the power function, it will take in 2 input and can be the double type. Then the result will be double. You can also have max function, which you can compare 2 value. Right? Let's say you want to compare 2 integer. Then you will expect it to return you an integer back. And there are also functions called the rand function, which it will generalize a random number for you. Then if you want to ask for a random number, do you need to give any input?
No.
No. So you don't need any input. So there are some functions where you don't need input, where it will just give you an integer, give you some random number. Now you can also create your own function. So you can have something like say hello, which you don't really need to give an input, and you don't need to give an output. Whenever you call the function say hello, you prompt a hello on the console. So if you look at those functions, some of the function you see it in math, or you might see it in math, where some the function, if you look at the last 2, you can download in C++, but not so much in math, right? Because in math, a function are defined to be every value from the input will return to you a single output. But if you look at the rand function, say hello function, it doesn't even have an input. Okay, so now we know what's a function and what does a function do in C++. We need to know how do we use it. Now, instead of saying we want to use a function in C++, we will say we want to call the function. Since each function has a name, so we want to use the function, we will just call the function by name, right? By the function name. So we will call a function by following. So you will have the function name, and then in the parentheses, you will give whatever the input that it required. And when you do that, C++ will perform whatever the function task and fill in the result in the place when you call it. Here is a typo. Right, so in place of our calls. So whenever you call the function, it will perform the function task and then replace it with a result. So for example, we can call the square root function. So we can take square root of 5.0. Right, so 5.0 is a double. Right, so we if you look at the chart here, we know the square root will take in a double input. So we will give it a double input. So this will make the C++ to call the square root function. Now let's say I want to see out square root 5.0. So what it does is C++ will perform the function task and fill the result in the place of your call of the function. So this is actually main C out, and then you will compute square root of 5, square root of 5. So C++ will figure out square root of 5 is equals to 2.236, maybe a few more digits. And then it will replace it with your call. So you have 2.236. So it will print the value out.
How do you on the second C out? You have, I don't understand. You have to put the number in yourself.
No, I'm just saying this is what the C++ does. So doing this, right, C++ will figure out the value and then do the task.
How would you write the second part of the code?
I'm just saying this is what C++ does behind the scene. So C++ will figure out the value and then print it, because that's what you ask the C++ to do.
Okay.
You're not actually printing the second one. It's just the first one is equivalent to the second one.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, so let's say you have x equals to square roots of 2.0 plus 1. Then what it does is the C++ will calculate square root of 2. And we know square root of 2 is equal to 1.414. Then x will becomes 2.414, right? Since you add 1 to it. Now, let's say you want to print the square roots from 1 to 10. Right, we know this can be done in a single for loop. You can have a for loop and you want to print the square roots from 1 up to 10, I++, and you want to see out the square roots of I. They want to end the line.
So how do you actually compute the square root?
This so the function, you will want the C++ to figure out for you. Now, if
Wait,
you
but-
just type the coding,
So square root is built into C++?
there's library that do that, and that's what I'm gonna bring out here. Okay, so if we compile it, you might see an error, right? Because the C++ don't recognize square roots, right? So we know this is a function, and like some of you just mentioned before, but we did not write it. So what we need to do is C++ have like a built-in library, so you can think of it like think of it as a calculator, right? So you have access to some mathematical function. So the square roots is actually included in the CMath library. So if you include the CMath library, it will grant you access to the square root function. So now if we put that in, we are able to compile it. If you look at it, it brings us the first 10 square roots. So this is square root of 1, square root of 2, square root of 3, square root of 4 is 2, square root of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, square root of 9 is 3, and square root of 10 is 3.16.
So if it's a double, it's always going to be 6 digits.
It just C++, it print you five decimal place. So the only difference is I add the library, right? So the library here, right, what we include here is what we call the library in the language, and it gives us access to different built-in code. So now if you look at our standard beginning, include IO string, it will just give us access to IO string, which allows us to do things like cout, cint. Right, so the IO string is like the it allows you to perform some basic function we want to do. Okay, any questions here? Okay, the next class we will see how we write the function on our own, right? How do we make our own function besides some built-in function. Okay, and practice on the practice test and then the practice question on Nasty folder that I uploaded. So I will so once you submit it, you should be able to review your own solution and the answer. If not, I will post like a separate PDF solution sheet up. Then that will be end of the week.
So you actually don't even need IO stream unless if you're not using cout and cin.
Yes, but if you are not using the cout, and if you're not using cout at this point, you don't know what your function is doing. So that's why we always have it.
Okay.
But yes, so the IO string for now like give you access to cout and cin. So that's what we are using from that library.
So all of our programs were using it. That's why we need IO stream.
Yeah, so mainly we
Programs
use
that
it
we did.
because you need to use cout and cin,
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yes. So I would say for this level of code, like, yes, we need that because you need to see what your code are performing.
Professor, I had another question. So what is the difference between CMath and math.h?
Thank you, Professor.
That will just give you access to the different library.
Are they different or are they the same?
I think if you do,
Because for power functions, I used like math.h and it works. So like, is CMath for different functions?
yeah,
I think
so there are libraries that like store different functions. So if you find like some function where you can do it under some library but not the other library, then you know they probably include different built-in function.
I think
Right.
math.h is for like C, and CMath is for like C++.
But it works on C++ too, I think,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I tried it.
If it works on C, it could work on C++,
All right,
but
got it.
it's like a more modern version.
All right, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, for now we will end it here and I will see everyone Thursday. Have a
Thank
nice
you,
day.
Professor. Bye.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
But, Professor, I had a question.